Hey guys, so today I wanted to talk to you about a topic that is a little tougher than some of the lighter things that you may have seen here on my channel. We're going to be talking about some of my childhood experiences that, looking back on after a lot of therapy and self-discovery, I think I would definitely consider to be traumas in my life. Now I know that word isn't used as often as it should be and may sound super dark and depressing, but I promised that I was going to be giving you guys the raw, uncensored truth here on my channel. Throughout the past 10 years, I feel like I've chosen to really put in the work. I have chosen to get better and be better, and I no longer want to be defined by my traumas any longer, especially, to live in that victim mentality. But in order to get to this place, I've had to really work through my past traumas to now be on my way towards healing and living my true life's purpose. I'm hoping that by me telling you guys a part of my story, that it will start the conversation within yourself and lead you or anyone who has been in a similar situation on a road to self-love and wanting to heal your heart, and that it can help some of you that maybe have had similar experiences just feel a little bit less alone. I do consider myself to be an open book, and the reality is that it can be hard for me to really talk about these more vulnerable subjects. So I decided to ask my good friend Jamie to ask me some questions about my experiences with trauma, and let's be real, to also keep me on track. So let's get to it.
So you've told me before that other people have shared their first memory with you. What are some of the things that they've told you they remember?
Well, so I have definitely asked around lately about what people's first memory is in general as a kid, and Matt said it was a happy memory. So it was a happy memory of him in his crib with his grandma picking him up or something like that. And I remember Nicole saying something similar, just probably me picking her up from the crib. And most people, I think in general, have a very happy first memory experience, unlike myself.
What is your first memory?
My first memory as a baby, I was 2 years old, I believe, but it was walking in on my father with another woman. And I just remember this as if it was yesterday, really. So I was at his house, not knowing that my mom and dad were separated, and I was in his brown leather chair watching Sesame Street. And I remember I wanted something, don't know what, and I couldn't find him. I was yelling his name. I was like, Dad, 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 nothing, no response. So then I just went around his house, and then there was a crack open to his bedroom door, and it was really, really quiet. And then I just saw this woman with long black hair to her butt, basically, and them just making out intensely.
Do you remember how you felt at the time, or you really
I was really sad. I think I was crying. I felt like a weird, abandoned feeling, I guess, of abandonment. And I just didn't bother him, so he didn't know that I saw him. I did tell him though before he passed away. That was my first memory. I told my dad everything, so.
So let's talk about your mom and dad's relationship for a little bit of backstory there. Do you know how they first met?
Okay, so my mom and dad definitely, it was kind of like my dad was chasing my mom all over the world. So my mom, she's a nurse, and she was born in the Philippines in a very poor province called Nueva Ecija. And she basically, every Filipino's dream that lives in the Philippines is to marry a doctor, and preferably a white man that's a doctor, because everyone just wants to come to America. This was back in the day. This was back in the early 80s. So Steve loves Asian women, especially Filipino women. He loved them. And he fell in love with my mom right away, he told me. And my mom was playing super hard to get. Now I know where I get that from. And she basically just didn't want him at all. Didn't even find him attractive at first. And she kind of heard that he was a player a little bit. And she was just wondering what is this white man doing? He's an attorney. Why is he here? He's a womanizer. And at the time, my mom was on her way to Seattle. She was already leaving the Philippines to come to the States. And my dad literally followed her. And my mom was not having it until she finally made her way back to the Philippines from Seattle, and he was there again, and so she finally gave it up.
What was their wedding like?
Their wedding was so extravagant. Okay, so I didn't really realize that like my mom was into like fashion, because like coming from poverty, you're like, do you even like, is that a dream? I'm like, I guess it is. So my mom loves nice things. She loves shopping. She always has. She loves bargaining though. She loves to like get it for like 5 cents cheaper than it was. But my mom and my father, they had a huge wedding in the Philippines. Like the news covered it. They were all over newspapers. My mom had like one of the best like dress designers in the Philippines ever, I guess, from like some runway show that they just saw. But my dad obviously had money. He was an attorney. My mom was just still up and coming. She still hadn't started her nursing company, and she was just a nurse basically. And it was a really big deal. Like they rented out like the Ritz in Manila, and like my mom's family from Nueva Ecija, her province, came up. And like when I tell you my mom comes from a very poor province, I've been there a few times because my mom wanted to obviously teach us a lesson as kids that, you know, how lucky we are. But like she didn't have toilets in her house growing up, and she had holes basically, like you had to watch where you were walking, because like there was different levels, but it wasn't all flooring, you know what I mean? So it was like, it was so easy just to literally fall down another level. Like it was pretty bad. It was a pretty bad living situation, I guess you could say. And to have like a huge wedding like this is kind of unheard of, and it was definitely publicized. So it was a huge wedding. Like think Sex in the City, but Philippine version.
So then did they come to the United States right after they got married?
Yes. So basically they were already living in the States. So my mom didn't speak English. My dad basically put her into school. She learned how to speak English, and she always had this passion to develop a nursing company, which is basically like a nursing agency. So like in Hollywood, you have agents, right? Your agents give you, your agents help you book work. My mom's company helped nurses book hospitals, so like different patients for themselves. So basically this company that she created from the ground up, my father really helped her and helped invest in her startup, and also taught her English. And now my mom doesn't even have an accent. It's so crazy. But yes, they did go back to the States. They literally separated maybe like a year and a half later after they got married.
Did either of them ever talk to you about what their marriage was like, given that it was so brief?
My mom said that my dad was a womanizer, which he was. I mean, clearly, since he left the States to go open a bunch of strip clubs in Thailand. So they weren't meant to be. But I'm just happy that they were together, because I wouldn't be here doing my YouTube channel. Just kidding.
How did things change for you after the day you walked in on your dad?
Well, I think that, you know, it's very important, those years of your life, right, as a toddler. So for me, if that's my first memory, I think that I've always had this, like, I've had like daddy issues, you know, and I've really wanted, you know, I've always been this person who always wants to be in relationships, and sometimes toxic relationships, most of the time, especially when I was in high school, all the way up until basically I moved here to Los Angeles at 20 years old, or 21. And seeing that, I think, even though they were already technically separated, what do I know? I'm 2 years old. So I think for me, like when I saw my dad with another woman, I just felt I had that feeling already of abandonment, which didn't help with me, you know, being social and feeling confident, or having any type of self-love for that matter, or seeing any type of example of what a real relationship is, of loyalty and love and unconditional love, I guess.
Do you feel like the divorce itself was traumatizing for you in your childhood, or was it kind of you were too young to understand?
I think it was the memory. My first memory was the most traumatic, I think, for me, especially when it comes to, because like at 2, you don't really understand what divorce is. And in general, my mom, because she has been raised in this Asian culture of not really learning how to express your feelings, it's just not what they do, she didn't really break it down for me. But what she did do was she threw me to a therapist who did explain it. However, like that was so, like that memory is so vivid in my mind that I don't really know what happened in between. All I know is that my father moved from the Bay Area to the Philippines first, and I basically had this crazy, weird relationship with him where my mom wanted me to have a relationship with my father, so we would talk a lot on the phone, but I barely saw him. Like if I wanted to see my dad, I'd have to travel across the world to go visit him in the Philippines, or once in a while we would meet up in Spain, like when my mom met Bob, her current husband. So it's like I felt like I was never judged by him, so I would tell him my deepest, darkest secrets, and he would listen. He would just listen, and he's at the end of the day, he couldn't really give me advice, but he couldn't tell me what to do, because he wasn't that father figure. He was more of like that distant, like, pen pal in a way. Because there's like no constant for me, you know, I got into this pattern of dating men that were non-committal and unreliable, abusive, alcoholics, addicts. Basically, I dated my father. My father was never abusive in like a physical sense. But I think that, look, I always look back and I always think about like, okay, would I have rather had him stay in this relationship being unhappy and me witnessing them fighting constantly, or would I have rather him do what he did, which was leave, and wanted to ultimately make sure that I lived a better life? And I think that I would have rather have it this way, because, you know, witnessing it is one thing, and then just not having a father figure is another thing. But nothing is like, honestly, I'd rather have a father figure, which I ended up having because my mom remarried an amazing man. But at the end of the day, if I would have witnessed my father drinking and, like, you know, getting in fights and yelling matches with my mother, I think I'd end up being a little bit more cuckoo than I am.
Recently done a ton of courses and reading in a lot of different ways. What is your perspective on trauma in general and as to how it affects people's lives today?
So I believe everyone goes through different stages of trauma. I think everyone experiences it, whether that be your sister telling you there's no such thing as Santa Claus, or, you know, whatever. There's different levels of it. I think that, you know, as far as avoiding trauma, I mean, it just depends on what you're triggered by. Like, trauma could easily be something as light as what I just mentioned, or it can be as dark as being sexually abused. So as far as trauma goes, I believe that, like, everyone has had experienced trauma. I mean, trauma for me means that it's a memory that, you know, you can't shake right away, right? It's something that has affected you, that either you didn't feel the feelings at that time when the trauma was happening, so therefore it hasn't passed by. It hasn't been like a past trauma. Trauma can really affect you, and it can affect you for the rest of your life if you don't get any help. And I've really realized after all these years of therapy that I needed to kind of feel the feelings and almost, in a sense, relive it, because I was really good at numbing. You know, I became, because of the trauma and the intensity of it, I did start drinking a lot. You know, when it comes to, you know, abuse, substance abuse, that was something that, anything that I could do to numb, you know. So the thought of meditation back then was like, you're out of your mind. Can't pay me to sit still, you know. So until you're able to really feel whatever feelings you felt and accept it and let it pass through your system, because feelings are very, very temporary. So it's like, it's a temporary feeling, and but you have to be able to feel it in order to bypass it. So with that, I have obviously learned all of this through therapy, years and years of therapy since I was a little girl, from when the divorce happened to moving here to Los Angeles, and, you know, being in therapy here. And also when I got sexually abused, my mom also put me in therapy. So this was obviously my choice, was to start therapy again when I moved to Los Angeles at 21 years old. And, you know, there comes a point too where you're just like, okay, you need to start practicing what you preach, and you don't want to ever be codependent on your therapist, right? So I have found now other ways of fulfilling that void, I guess. And it's through a lot of, you know, self-help books, like YouTube, and taking online courses. Like, it's always fascinated me, the reason behind people's behaviors. And, you know, with therapy, sometimes it can get a little like, okay, so now I can finally connect the dots. Like, why do I date men, or why did I used to date men that were unavailable? Because I didn't have a father figure in my life. Or why did I accept abuse in my you know, life when it comes to a few boyfriends I dated? back in my high school career, is because obviously the abuse for me equaled love. So it was like I didn't feel worthy, I didn't have any self-love, so how can I expect to accept love into my life? I didn't even know what that meant, right? So
now as an adult, how do you view those traumas? Like, were they a really big thing? Were they small, the divorce and the first memory?
I mean, I don't really measure the traumas, but I do know that forgiveness has been a really big thing for me lately. So, you know, when my father passed away, it was really hard because there were so many unanswered questions. I didn't even get a chance to really tell him that I forgive him. And because we had such a close relationship, I think that it was a weird close relationship. Like, we wouldn't talk for like years even, and then we would get on the phone and talk for a couple hours and we'd catch up. And I don't know, I saw the pain. Every time my mom would take me to Thailand to visit my dad, I'd leave them in a room for like 2 seconds. I'd go to the bathroom, right? We'd be to dinner, go to the bathroom. I come back, my mom's bawling her eyes out. And this happened every single freaking year we would go visit my father. But at the end of the day, if you think about it, if you put yourself in my mother's shoes, coming from poverty, not speaking English, to like look where she is now, which is, you know, she's a multi-millionaire self-made businesswoman that literally came from nothing and had a little support from her ex-husband, and like her whole life transformed, and it was because of Steve. So it's really it's crazy to see that, and to also see how much he used to still affect her, you know. So it's like I would be more hurt for my mother because like I could tell that like it's because of her beliefs, because of Steve, and the way that Steve wasn't faithful to her was the reason why she instilled certain beliefs in me, which was like, don't trust anybody, always be independent, never depend on a man for anything, which has cut off my vulnerability to the outside world in general.
How do you feel about it now? Do you feel like those experiences and the traumas of them are something you've moved on from, or do you feel like they still are impacting your life?
They definitely don't. The trauma that I've dealt with, I wouldn't say define me. In a weird way, and this is going to sound weird to a lot of people that don't understand trauma, but everything is meant to be, you guys, because at the end of the day, right, it is what makes you you. It's what makes you your unique self. Because like without the trauma that I dealt with, without my mom dealing with her poverty, she wouldn't be the woman she is today, and I wouldn't be the woman that I am today. Because honestly, it's those failures, traumas, that really do define you. And I feel like the word failure or even trauma is the wrong word to use. These are just like life, like bumps in the road that happen to everybody, and you just need to grow from it if you choose to. I feel like you know, the trauma of me witnessing my father with another woman definitely became the start of my traumas. You know, it started from age 2 to, you know, the divorce, which was short after. And obviously, you know, when my mom and my stepdad got married, you know, this will be covered in a different video, but basically, you know, my stepsister and I got sexually molested by a babysitter of ours that helped with driving us around. He'd pick us up from school, and basically, like, our Filipino nanny didn't drive, so we needed a driver. And this was a retired mailman, and he sexually abused us for a few years. Then that led to, you know, me in high school dating abusive men and finding that it was kind of like an addiction in a way. It was like, that to me was love. It was like that passionate love that, like, you know, the constant breakup, the constant fights, the jealousy, the rage, the feeling of emptiness, and then happiness, and like that emotional roller coaster. I was I was just really addicted to that feeling. I didn't know anything else, and I felt like, you know, because I was so good at hiding my feelings, that like if I felt like that, then that's what love is, that's passionate love. And then it led to and escalated into a dangerous downward spiral, really. And it was like with three long-term relationships back to back of me being abused physically and mentally, and, you know, to the dancing world, you know. And it's like it's not necessarily something that I am ready to talk about at this moment, but it is definitely similar to like living like an Olympian. You're constantly in this world. Ballroom dance in general is very close and it's very touchy-feely, and things happen, and I feel like there's a reason and there's a purpose for all of this to happen. But I definitely have become this quiet child who my mom thought was deaf, to now being overly outspoken. Like it's hard for me to bite my tongue, and it's hard for me not to speak up for myself, because as a kid I didn't say anything. I let it all happen, in that sense that like I never defended myself. And now obviously being a woman that works, and I'm very independent, so I think with that comes self-love and self-confidence in a way that I am now able to speak up for myself. So it's like now I'm in the process of trying to find this gray area where it's like I have my boundaries, but I'm not completely unattainable.
Do you feel like there was anything that was like a turning point for you to stop like putting yourself in these situations that were traumatizing?
Yeah, I think the turning point for me was after my competitive dancing career. It was moving from Harlem to Los Angeles, and not having a dance partner or a dance coach dictate my wardrobe, my favorite color, or whatever. It was like, Cheryl, you have to make your own decisions. You have to get home on your own. You have to rent a car on your own. Like, you're moving your life to Los Angeles to dance with a celebrity, and that celebrity is not going to take care of you. It's like you have to take care of yourself. Doing interviews with Dancing with the Stars, starting to recognize, what my own voice was, having to make, like I said, decisions on my own, little things that may not make sense to everyone else, but it's like coming up with choreography. I had no one to approve if what I was doing was good or not, and it's like I had to basically learn myself. I had to learn like what I liked, what I disliked, what was my favorite color, what type of music did I like, because as a ballroom dancer, especially competitive ballroom dancer, it's like it's a man's world, and the men just dictate everything. So it's like we just sit back and look pretty. So all in all, after everything that I just mentioned to you guys, which obviously we're going to dig deeper into this in future videos, but I think that I clearly have broke the habit and the pattern that I was going through, right? As from going from abusive relationship to now marrying a man who literally won't kill an ant. Okay, like he is an animal lover, he loves me to death, and he is just the opposite of those types of like nice guys. The one that I ended up marrying would normally, back in my like teenage years, would be such a turnoff. Like I find that actually quite disgusting that the guy wasn't like physically or mentally abusing me, which is so crazy to think. But like I thought that was a sign of weakness. That wasn't a real man, and it's actually quite the opposite. And I obviously, with a lot of the work I've done with therapists and on myself in general, I feel like I truly do appreciate that, and like I said, I'm now very sensitive to any type of raising your voice or abusive patterns or anything like that. Like I put a kibosh to that in 2 seconds now. And I just think that I'm continually gonna always work on myself, because like at the end of the day, I think it's important that, for me at least, that I just want to become the best version of me that I can be. And when I understand life and when I can put the pieces together, it all starts to make sense. And it gets really deep and it gets super spiritual, and I'm not going to bore you guys with this now, but it has definitely helped me, instead of consistently going to a therapist, the same therapist, continuing to still talk about the past. I love therapy and I will still go to therapy, but then there comes a time where you're like, I need to now apply what I've learned. Like I am the best therapist to my friends. I sometimes wish I could take my own advice, but like you just do have to practice what you preach, and that's the hardest thing to do. It's like I can take 100 online courses, but am I actually practicing what they're preaching and what I'm preaching, obviously? So I've also found that meditation, ever since I stopped like with the alcohol and trying to live a sober life, that the meditation has helped me just sit in stillness and understand that my thoughts are separate from my feelings. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch this video and for making me feel safe enough to talk to you guys about the ups and downs of my life story. I hope that some of you were able to relate to some of my experiences in your own way. So just let me know in the comments below if you want to see more of these types of videos here on my channel. This was really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to these types of experiences in my life. And like I said, I'm grateful for them because they really have helped me become the person I am today. But I feel like there is so much more we can talk about. So if you want to see more, make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel. And if you click that little bell on your screen, you'll get notified every single time I post a new video. Until next time, sending you all so much love and light.